In North Korea, the government doesn't just control your job or your home. It controls who you're allowed to love, and how. Ri Sur-yeon signed a document on her wedding day, requiring her to report her own husband to state security. She was 28 years old, and she had never once questioned it. Today, she's telling her story for the first time to a Western audience. A story that begins in a Pyongyang wedding hall, and ends with a child born free on the other side of the DMZ. Join us in standing up for human rights. Subscribe to hear more stories of freedom. It all started like this. On the morning of my wedding, my mother was combing my hair when she said, "Sur-yeon, from today on, Hyokchul is your sky. You must honor him. Do you understand?" I looked at her face in the mirror and smiled. Her words didn't seem strange. Not to me. Growing up in the narrow alleys of Manjeongdae, overlooking the Daedong River, I passed the portrait of the great leader every morning. At school, we chanted, "Uphold the revolutionary spirit," like breathing. That was the only world I'd ever known. It was May 2024. Spring breezes drifted from Moranbong Hill toward the wedding hall in Pyongyang's Junggu district. My mother had spent days wandering the Jongmadang. Think of it as a kind of open air market, hunting down tofu and pork for the reception. Corn prices changed from one day to the next, so she bought things one item at a time. Rice was out of the question. Even coal briquettes for heating were barely scraped together. Some of you probably remember what it's like to swap out those old coal briquettes in winter. The smell, the weight, we had that too, just for a much longer time. When Hyokchul spotted me at the entrance of the hall, his ears turned red. Between the two of us, I was always the first to speak. "Why are you standing there so stiff? What kind of face is that on your wedding day?" "I'm nervous." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. He laughed too. Back then, neither of us had any idea what was waiting for us. The ceremony ended. Hyokchul was reaching for my hand when a Boibu officer, a state security department agent, stepped forward. A rigid man in his 40s. His voice was flat. His face was stone. "Comrade Kong Hyokchul. Comrade Ri Sur-yeon. Please follow me. There is a special briefing for diplomatic couples assigned abroad." Hyokchul's hand found mine and then let go. That brief warmth stayed with me longer than it should have. Still in my wedding dress, I walked into a cold room. A document was placed in front of me. One sentence stopped me cold. The spouse bears the obligation to observe all speech and conduct of the other party, and to report any signs of irregularity immediately. The hand holding my bouquet began to tremble. Still, I smiled and signed. Questioning the system wasn't something I was capable of imagining, not then. When we walked out, Hyokchul and I locked eyes. He smiled too. Not a word between us. That was the first scene of our marriage. We landed in Havana in the middle of a July afternoon. The moment the plane door opened, heat poured in. Nothing in Pyongyang had prepared me for it. Humid, sweet, something like flowers buried underneath. Outside the airport, color was everywhere. Yellow buildings, blue buildings, pink buildings, vintage American cars rolling slowly past. Music drifting from somewhere, salsa, though I didn't know that word yet. Standing there, I had a single thought. This is the revolutionary ally we were taught about? Since childhood, Cuba was the brother nation that stood with us against imperialism. But these streets, color spilling from every wall, people moving without tension. Sidewalk stalls stacked with fruit. Mangoes, papayas, coconuts. It was nothing like bargaining over a handful of corn at the Pyongyang market. I couldn't say it out loud, but something turned cold inside my chest. A quiet unease that what I'd been taught and what I was seeing weren't the same thing. I glanced at Hyokchul. He was staring out the window. Silent, unreadable. That's when I started watching his face. Not out of love, out of habit. A habit the system had already installed. Our quarters were in a quiet alley in the old city. A worn two-story building. As we climbed the stairs, Hyokchul reached for my bag. I stepped aside without thinking. He didn't press. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Music still floated in from outside. Hyokchul lay with his back to me. Our first night as a married couple, and all that passed between us was silence. The oath kept circling through my mind. Report any signs of irregularity immediately. Over and over. Is he watching me right now? The next morning, Hyokchul set down his chopsticks and said, quietly, "You didn't sleep last night. Are you all right?" I hesitated. Was that concern or surveillance? One sentence. 2 readings. I'm fine. That was all I gave him. He didn't push. And so our Havana honeymoon began. Same room, same table, same commute to the consulate. 2 people choosing every word with surgical care. Who drew the line first? Maybe the oath drew it for us. Driving a wedge between the people closest to you. That was something the regime had perfected. It was an ordinary day. Nothing special about it. 3 months into Havana, a Tuesday afternoon in October. Hyokchul was at the consulate. I was alone, cleaning our room. I lifted the mattress to wipe underneath and found something wedged into the metal frame. Small, flat, about the size of 2 fingertips pressed together. Dark and rigid, with a thin wire attached. I thought it was a clump of dust at first. I reached out and touched it. Hard. I left it where it was. That evening, a senior diplomat's wife from our consulate stopped by. A woman who had lived overseas for nearly 20 years. Careful, restrained, the kind who never spoke first. I showed her. Her face went blank. Where did you find this? Under the bed. She was quiet for a moment. Scanned the room. Then, just above, a whisper. Leave it. Pretend you never saw it. I didn't need her to explain. It was a listening device. Our bedroom had been recorded. The first night in Havana. The night we arrived. That early morning I'd first mentioned home to Hyokchul. Every word spoken in the hours we were supposed to be most ourselves, flowing somewhere, to someone. She left. I stood in the middle of the room for a long time. Outside, the salsa kept playing. Some evenings it sounded joyful. That night, it felt like a threat. Think about it, your bedroom, your country's ear pressed against the wall. From your very first night as newlyweds. When Hyokchul came home, I couldn't speak. Just looking at his face stopped the words. What if he already knew? What if he had put it there? The moment that thought crossed my mind, I hated myself for it. What kind of wife suspects her husband? But that was exactly the person the oath had been designed to create. At dinner, he looked at me. You're quiet tonight. I'm tired. That was it. I barely touched my food. He noticed but didn't ask again. After that, the apartment changed. Havana outside stayed loud and vivid. But inside, we lived in a silence heavier than anything back in Pyongyang. Side by side with the person closest to me and completely alone. That month, my body felt different. Havana winters are nothing like Pyongyang's. Still, I kept shivering. The smell of food made me nauseous. Mornings were the worst. At first I blamed the climate. But the days passed and nothing improved. One afternoon, I walked into a Cuban pharmacy near the consulate. My Spanish was nearly non-existent. I pointed and gestured my way to a pregnancy test. Back at the apartment, I locked the bathroom door, hands shaking, and waited. 2 lines. I stared at them for a long time. Joy arrived then vanished. 3 seconds, at most. This child will belong to that country the moment it's born. Those of you who've had children, you know that feeling. The moment you find out how it fills you completely. Mine lasted less than a second before it collapsed. Because I could already see it. This child passing the great leader's portrait every morning. Learning to hate Americans at school. Signing an oath on their own wedding day. I sat on the bathroom floor, holding the edge of the toilet, and didn't move. The question was whether to tell Hyokchul. I wanted to. He was my husband. We were supposed to share this. But my hand wouldn't move toward the door. Since the night I found the device. I had never said anything true inside those walls. What if he reported it? The fact that I was even thinking this made me sick. What wife is afraid to tell her husband she's pregnant? Somehow, I had become that wife. 10 days. I carried it alone. Then one evening, Hyokchul came home and just looked at me. You haven't been eating. I'm fine. You don't look fine. My eyes stung. I turned and walked into the kitchen, pretending to busy myself with a pot. A voice in my head going around and around. Tell him. Don't tell him. Tell him. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat by the window alone. Havana's streets were still going, still humming. I rested my hand over my stomach. That quiet place where nothing showed yet. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do. That was the first thing I ever said to my child. 3 days later, Hyokchul did something unusual. A Saturday morning, he put on civilian clothes without explanation. Then he asked me to take a walk. No reason given. El Malecon, the long seawall stretching along Havana's shore. In the evenings, locals fish there, play guitar, sit with their partners and watch the waves. That day, walking beside him felt strange. Why was he doing this? Did he know something? And I hated myself again for even thinking that. I was standing right next to him and utterly alone. We walked without speaking. Wave sound, car sound, music from somewhere, all of it merging, swallowing the space between us. He guided me to the far end of the seawall, where the crowd thinned out. The ocean came in hard against the stone. He turned toward the water and called me by my name. Not comrade, just Sir Yeon SSI. The way he'd said it before we were married. Before any of this, that single word sent a current through me. I never reported you. Not once. I signed the oath, but I never followed it. The waves nearly took his voice. I heard every word anyway. Not through my ears. Somewhere deeper. My vision blurred. I looked out at the water so he wouldn't see. The sea that day was a shade of blue I've never quite been able to describe since. I told him the same. A long silence settled between us. Just the waves. I don't know how long we stood there. But that silence felt different from all the others. It was the first one I didn't have to guard myself inside. And then I told him. The thing I'd been carrying for 10 days. He looked at me without speaking. I held his gaze. Two people who had spent months looking away from each other finally looking. I don't want to have this baby here. He nodded. Once. Slowly. We didn't need to say more. The waves covered what needed to be covered. The listening device was back in the bedroom. And there, at the far end of that seawall, we became a real couple for the first time. On the walk home, he took my hand. Not the way he had at our wedding, that brief grip before letting go in front of the security agent. This was different. He wasn't letting go. That was the day we decided to run. The preparation was quieter than I expected. No grand scheme. Inside the apartment, we still said nothing real. The device was still there. Instead, we went to El Malecon often. That far end of the seawall, where the waves drowned out everything else. Our private meeting room. One evening, Hyokchul spoke quietly under the sound of the water. There's a route through Mexico. A broker. Our savings should cover it. I looked out at the sea. After a while. When? As soon as we're ready. That was the whole conversation. That was how we decided. The hardest part was showing nothing. Not to our colleagues. Not to our parents back home. Phone calls were monitored, everyone knew that. So the last time I heard my mother's voice, I knew it was the last time. I said I was doing well, not to worry, and hung up. I sat there afterward and didn't move for a long time. How do you say goodbye to your mother with a lie? That was the hardest phone call of my life. The date was set for June 2025. 4 months along, and my stomach hadn't grown much yet. Small mercy. I filed leave from the consulate. Told them we were traveling. The lie came out without hesitation, and that frightened me more than anything. I had become someone for whom deception was effortless. It was 4 in the morning. We each picked up one bag. Hyokchul squeezed my hand. No words. That grip said everything. I squeezed back. We left behind almost everything we'd brought from Pyongyang. What we took: our passports, a few dollars, and a small ornamental charm. My mother had tucked into my wedding bag as a gift. My hand shook picking it up. That tiny thing, all that remained of home. Leaving the old city, I looked back once. Our worn 2-story building stood in the dark. A stranger's building in a stranger's country, and yet my throat tightened. That's when it hit me. Physically, there was no going back. I thought of my mother. My father. What would they feel if they ever found out? Hyokchul took my hand again. I spoke silently to the child inside me. Hold on. I'll get you there. And we walked into the dark. We reached Mexico City in early July 2025. Getting from Cuba to Mexico, I can't fully explain it. 2 days, following a broker through steps I barely registered. Pregnant and terrified. What I remember is this: I never let go of Hyokchul's hand. Not once. The day we set down our bags. In a small room on the outskirts of the city, my legs gave out. I sat on the floor and couldn't get up. Hyokchul sat beside me and, without a word, gently rubbed my back. After a while, he said, "You did so well. It was so hard and you held on." For the first time, his Korean had softened. A shade more familiar, less formal. All the rigid distance the oath had built between us had dissolved in that sentence. Pyongyang to Havana. Havana to Mexico City. How far we had come. It was all there in those few words. Next, contact the South Korean embassy. When I dialed and heard Korean on the other end, something clenched in my throat. The same language but a different cadence. Familiar and foreign at once, like a song you know in someone else's voice. The counselor on the line was calm and steady. "Are you in a safe location?" "Yes, we're safe." After I hung up, Hyukchul looked at my face. Now it truly begins. What followed were 2 months, the longest 2 months of my life. 5 months pregnant. 6 months. My stomach became impossible to hide. We stayed in that small room, surviving day by day. Food was scarce. Going outside felt dangerous. The fear that North Korean agents might find us never fully left. In the middle of all that, Hyukchul brought up names. Boy or girl, what would we call them? I cried at the question. Itself, just the tenderness of it, in all that fear. He offered one name, Hanbyul, one star shared between South and North. Together, it was more than a name. Everything we were hoping for lived inside those 3 syllables. Everything we had crossed oceans to find. In September 2025, an official from the South Korean embassy came to meet us. When he finished and turned to leave, he paused. You're almost there. Hyukchul looked away. I looked at him. Neither of us could speak. We were both holding back tears and we both knew it. We could see the end now. We both knew what that meant. We landed at Incheon Airport in October 2025. From the plane window, I saw the peninsula below. Not Pyongyang, not Seoul, just the land, the same mountains, the same rivers threading through. Something cracked open in my chest. I had never felt so clearly, so physically, that this land had once been one. Walking through arrivals, something was missing. I kept waiting for it, that sensation of being watched. The need to monitor my own expression. It wasn't there. No one was going to report my face. Hyukchul leaned close and said, quietly, Sir Yeon SSI, we're free. I stopped walking. He stopped too. People rushed past us in every direction. We just stood there still while the world kept moving. In 28 years, I had never breathed air like that. There is a facility in South Korea called Honeymoon, a resettlement center for North Korean defectors. We spent several months there. On the first day, our counselor looked at us both and said, You've been through so much. Take your time here. Start slowly. Those words were the warmest thing I'd heard in years. I cried again. In the beginning, everything was disorienting. Grocery stores had so many choices I couldn't move. One day, Hyukchul stood staring at the subway map for a long time. Then turned to me. Do we have to memorize all of this? I laughed. Then cried. Because we had made it here together. You might smile at that and that's alright. But that moment meant more to me than almost anything else. When my northern accent slipped out in public, heads would turn. A supermarket employee, kind and helpful, pointed me in the right direction, then looked at me a second time. She'd heard something different. I shrank a little each time it happened. And still sharing this language with these people felt like a small miracle. We were the same people once. I could feel it, even in the difference between our words. In the spring of 2026, Hanbyul was born. The day Hyukchul held our child for the first time, he spoke softly. Your father will protect you. Grow up well on free ground. That was all. His face said the rest. I had no words. I miss the parents I left behind in the north. Today, tomorrow, every day after. If reunification comes, I want to walk that ground again. I hope it happens in our lifetime, in the lifetime of our generation. If it does, I want you to be there, too. Thank you for listening to this story all the way to the end. Because you listened, I was able to look back and walk this road one more time. I believe that if you understand what division means, if you've ever felt it, even from a distance, then this story didn't feel entirely like someone else's. Thank you.